We've got a lot of ground to cover today. The first thing I would start with is the usual boring disclaimer. Okay, we are not medical prescribers. Please do not amend any medication without working with the prescriber first. This is just given for educational purposes. Okay, so just to set the boring bit aside. My name's Adele. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a women's health practitioner, and my specialism within this is working with ADHD and hormones, but I work with all women all around the world, and I'm very passionate about progesterone. I've just released an ebook all around that, so I'll probably get very excited about that as we're talking today. And this is my wonderful colleague Jenny.
Hi, my name's Jenny. I run a Facebook group. I originally started it out as just for PMDD help for women, mainly because when I hit perimenopause, my normal PMS turned into very severe PMS, now called PMDD, and I basically joined some groups and realized that the only option for many women was to just have a hysterectomy. So I didn't like the thought of that because very young women are turning to this option, and so I started a group, and I've now got 8,500 members, and I'm an independent health researcher, so I don't just do PMDD, I do perimenopause, and I help women rejig, or I help women cut. I see patterns. So I help women basically with HRT, and I also help them with, because I'm a health coach. So I sort of, and even teenage girls, I'm quite passionate about making sure that they know the system and what the system is telling you is a lie often. So yeah, that's me.
As you can tell, we're going to get into some really juicy stuff today. Okay. So what I would say is we've gathered some questions from the people who couldn't be here, and we've kind of structured the session around that. We're going to make this a conversation. We did think there might be the odd reference to a PowerPoint, but we didn't want to just sit and flick through slides. We wanted to have a conversation about this. And we would invite you, if there's any comments or any questions that you want to ask, please do put them in the chat. What I would say is both Jenny and I are a little bit neurospicy, I was going to say a little bit, and we won't answer them as we go because we might just end up getting a little bit distracted with that one, of course, but we will come to them at the end. So anything that you want to share, please do put it in the chat and in that space. So without further ado, let's kick off with, what is estrogen dominance? So I'm going to start with you, Jenny, because I feel like you are the queen of all things estrogen dominant.
Right.
Which you're going to be very humble about.
I know. Yeah. People say, "Oh, you are," but I still think I learn something new every day. So, estrogen dominance. Is it estrogen dominance or is it progesterone deficiency? Because progesterone deficiency has the same symptoms as estrogen dominance. That's the sort of like the beginning of it. You'll see. I mean, if you were to have both sets of symptoms beside each other, they're exactly the same. So Carol Peterson, our very good friend, registered pharmacist, she doesn't tend to call it estrogen dominance. She calls it progesterone deficiency because, and I've found when I advocated for myself at my doctor's, using the word estrogen dominance gets you zero places because it's seen as pseudoscience, and doctors will say, well, there's no such thing as estrogen dominance. But if you flip that coin and you say, which I did with my consultant, because I'm a lady of, well, at the time I was 54, and I didn't want to take estrogen in my HRT routine because I don't get on with it. And so instead of saying, I think I'm estrogen dominant, I said, I think I'm progesterone deficient. And I think I've been progesterone deficient for all of my life because I have suffered with X, Y, Z right throughout my reproductive life. That got me a lot further than saying I'm estrogen dominant. That being said, it's typically something that is classified as estrogen is imbalanced as opposed to progesterone. So, it is progesterone deficiency ultimately. However, your estrogen can be really rather low, but even if it is low, you can have even lower progesterone, and it's more about, which medicine doesn't tend to do unless of course you're trying to get pregnant, and then they'll test it's called progesterone to estrogen ratio, and you can test that via, I mean, it's a crude marker. I tend to, in my work with PMDD women, I tend to see really low progesterone to estrogen ratios, but no doctor will test that. No doctor. Well, I mean, you're lucky to get a progesterone test unless you pay privately. So no doctor will test within the NHS will test progesterone because apparently it's just for having babies. So.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, does it? I mean, we're obviously going to go down that road. And I think just to help, if it helps with the visual, this is a healthy cycle, okay? This would be a cycle where we wouldn't be expecting a woman to be estrogen dominant symptoms. And when we're talking about the ratios, this is the part Jenny's referring to. How much progesterone is there in relation to estrogen? So if you've worked with me, you will know that I call estrogen the party girl. A little bit of partying is quite fun until it's not, and it starts making us feel awful. Whereas progesterone is like the mama who comes back to the house party, says, calm down, it's time to go to sleep. If there's not enough of this to keep our party girl in check, we start to get symptoms. So we might see with someone who is estrogen dominant, this progesterone curve being down here. You might still be ovulating, you might still be producing a bit of progesterone, but it's just insufficient to keep your estrogen levels in check. And I think that's the issue. Lots of people think, oh, estrogen dominant, I must be producing too much estrogen. Let's take some supplement like DIM and start moving all of that through the body. That can cause more problems because when we're not ovulating each month, we have a cycle that's more like this. That progesterone deficiency and estrogen just partying by herself, but this estrogen might be quite low. And so women can have these symptoms of low estrogen, but still be estrogen dominant, which I know can feel really confusing. So hopefully those images just help to kind of bring that into context a little bit.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say on that, Jenny?
I think that often people blame the luteal phase for their issues, and I think a lot of it, and then because in a normal phase or a normal woman that has perfect cycle and a really optimized cycle, you get women getting really confused about the fact that I had an argument with somebody the other day about how, well, I was allergic to my own progesterone, and I was like, well, how do you know that? How do you know you were? Oh, because I used to go crazy in my luteal phase. But how do you know you had any progesterone in your luteal phase? And when you don't, as per that lovely slide, then issues happen. Estrogen is responsible for, estrogen is it's an excitatory hormone. And when estrogen is unbalanced, it also kickstarts, estrogen stimulates histamine receptors and mast cells within the body.
It also acts as a neurotransmitter. So we get that anxious mood effect of the histamine because estrogen feeds histamine feeds estrogen. So you get that layer covered.
Not only is it just histamine, there's also serotonin as well. Serotonin is also stimulated by histamine and estrogen, and it's sort of this trifecta of people say, oh well, serotonin, isn't that the happy hormone? Well, actually, no. Serotonin when it's really unbalanced, it can cause depression and sort of feelings of helplessness and all these other things. So it's not just estrogen that is the issue. It's what happens when estrogen becomes unbalanced with everything else.
And I think something that's really important to touch on, because the other part of this conversation is around progesterone sensitivity, which we will go deeper into. But I think it's really important on this point you touched on, Jenny, is that the intuitive, logical discussion and belief that is in the mainstream is, well, I have issues in my luteal phase, which is where progesterone's at its highest, so it must be the progesterone I'm intolerant to, right?
Yeah.
But which would make logical sense on a very basic level. However, you're then making an assumption that your body is ovulating every month and producing enough progesterone for you to not feel bad. And what we know about modern women is we are the most progesterone deficient women that have ever lived because of our stress. So even if you knew you were ovulating, just by body signs like change of mucus, if you use LH strips, I'm not a fan of those, but starting to see some indicators, it doesn't mean there's enough being produced. And I think what Jenny and I see clinically time and again, women coming to us saying, I hate progesterone, I'm intolerant to it, I can't take it. It's this ratio. It's because the estrogen is dominating and the progesterone is insufficient. And I think we say that both, never going to gaslight a woman's experience. Even the clinical biochemists like Dr. Phyllis Bronson, Carol Peterson kind of go, you know, there's a lot of talk about progesterone intolerant. It doesn't make sense to me that we would be intolerant to a molecule our body makes, but you never want to gaslight a woman's experience.
It's
And
very,
so,
very rare to be
yeah,
truly progesterone intolerant.
yeah.
I mean, there are studies. I think that those sorts of studies are then sort of like misconstrued to become, and they become, and it's become like this thing. I mean, there's a couple of groups on Facebook that focus completely on progesterone intolerance, and but what you really have to look at is the symptoms of what progesterone sensitivity is. So when you take progesterone, and numerous people, I mean, there's a group on Facebook called the Estrogen Dominant Support Group, and in there we call it estrogen kickback. And progesterone, one of progesterone's molecular jobs or biochemical jobs is to sensitize estrogen receptors. And so if you take if you're taking HRT, for instance, and then, I mean, they always start you on the estrogen first. If you're taking that estrogen your first half of your cycle, and then you add the progesterone, micronized progesterone, not progestin, then that sensitizes what you're already taking. And it can still happen in a normal body as well. If you don't take enough for your needs, it sensitizes the estrogen, and the symptoms of progesterone sensitivity are estrogenic: sore boobs, mood issues, not being able to sleep, all those things that everybody complains about, and people go, oh my God, I go crazy when I take it. That's the sensitization of estrogen. It's not progesterone's fault. And it's an easy blame to say that it is the progesterone, because it sort of makes sense, doesn't it? When you go into your, well, it only happens when I start taking progesterone. Well, yes, it will, because progesterone is sensitizing what you've already taken. If I don't take the progesterone, the estrogen is fine. And you're like, well, it's a logic thing. Yes, that's completely fine, because you're not sensitizing that estrogen. Those estrogen receptors aren't being stimulated.
Fired up. Yeah, and so it makes really logical sense, right? I've taken 100 mg of progesterone, I've taken 200 mg of progesterone, I feel horrific. Why on earth would I take more? And we can go into that conversation. And I think it's about deeply acknowledging that is a real trauma for women. It's there, and it's absolutely
really,
happening. It's not about gaslighting it and saying, don't be ridiculous, it's not happening. It is happening, but the understanding of why is what needs the education and information. Because I am yet to see a woman clinically who's come through and been prescribed the right dose, the right type, the right timing, which are all really important with progesterone for that woman, and then she's not gone, oh my God, I'm there, I've got it, I get it now. But then
it's so satisfying to see that in clinic. It really is. And you're like, and they're like, oh my God, all that arguing I did with you, and you were right, and it's not to say that sometimes, I mean, there were women in my Facebook group that sometimes have had to have taken 2,000 milligrams of progesterone to get there, and our medical system won't prescribe it. So often women are left with having to either jump into the abyss and just do it themselves, or they're left taking a really low dose, which is doing no one any good. So it's frustrating, to say the least. But like, thankfully we've got ways and means of acquiring it, sort of through private clinics, and able to take patients to a place that the NHS won't do. I mean, I have heard of a couple of NHS consultants that have said, listened to their patients and said, okay, we'll give this a go. You've tried everything else. Why don't we give this a go? But the majority won't, because of that awful, awful thing that progesterone causes breast cancer.
Breast cancer. I did a post on this yesterday. It's utter nonsense. And this is one of the things that really triggers me around progesterone, and the insanity of the conversation and utter chaos and mess that women in their own hormonal chaos are just trying to get an answer, is that we know through repeated studies that body identical progesterone protects your breast health. Fact, repeatedly shown, end of discussion. Progesterone does not cause breast cancer. However, as we know, the pharmaceutical industry have done a fabulous job of rebranding synthetic progestins that do have a link with breast cancer as getting prescribers to call it progesterone. So what is happening is the utter absurdity that women are trialing a higher dose of progesterone, maybe 300, maybe 400, and going, this is it, this is my sweet spot, going into a GP and saying, would you consider going off license to prescribe this higher dose? My mood is regulated, I'm sleeping really well, my nervous system's regulated, I've got energy, I'm feeling good. And they say, don't touch that, you'll get breast cancer. However, what we can give you is the Mirena coil with a synthetic progestin, which they will then say, which will replace your progesterone.
And then you end up like Davina McCall.
Yeah. And so the insanity that we as women are dealing with, where we're having to go to a prescriber, and even well-informed women are coming away frightened, going, oh my God, am I giving myself breast cancer by putting progesterone in my body? Even on the ONAS cream, which I know is an online cream you can buy that Jenny and I both use in clinic, is to be able, it's happened to do with their ridiculous laws put on their causes breast cancer. Doesn't. But because of FDA regulations, we've just had this removed from estrogen, which is a whole different topic in itself. But progesterone, that is possibly the safest molecule on the planet to be able to support the body with, has all this fear around it. And for me, you have to follow the money. Synthetic progestins are a gazillion-dollar business. Body identical progesterone works on anxiety, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, epilepsy, menstrual migraines, PMDD, ADHD. There's a lot of money in the medications for those drugs. You cannot patent a body identical molecule. There's no money in progesterone.
Well, you
and
can,
that to me is
but
the
I
truth.
think that you can, but I think they're pretty much at the limit of what they can use. Like in America, they call it prometrium. It's got peanut oil in it. In the UK, it's eutrogestin, and it's mixed with, because it has to be mixed with a fat, a lipid. And so in the UK, it's mixed with soybean oil. Cyclogist has what's called hard fat, which they're not particularly forthcoming with the type of fats, but it's definitely a vegetarian type fat, because it's marketed for vegans. There's various gels and things like that as well. There's one called Lutogest, which is a gel. However, it's expensive to make, and so therefore the profit margins on it probably quite minimal by the time you've gone through the chemical steps to get it into what it needs to be. But I would imagine that progestins can be shunted out, and also progestins can be patented. Each individual one can be a slightly different chemical makeup to the next one or the next one, and you've got your patent, and that lasts for however long patents last, I don't know. So I agree.
Yeah, and I think, let's pop a Marina coil in. I don't have to see you for 8 years. It
Mhm.
is that. And then women have a really tough job getting out, but I'm not going to get on my Marina coil bandwagon because we've got
Oh,
much
don't
more
get me
important things to talk
started.
about. Estrogens here. So why do you think, let's have a conversation around why estrogen dominance can be more prevalent in some women? Why is it that some women become much more estrogen dominant?
The pill makes you estrogen dominant. Teenagers are naturally estrogen dominant. So, you know what teenage girls are like. They love their makeup and they love their nail polish and they love, like eating junk food and that sort of thing.
What we're talking about there is something called xenoestrogens. Okay. Our world is a toxic soup of chemicals that mimic estrogens.
Yeah.
Okay. So these chemicals come and they bind onto these estrogen receptors. They're really hard to get off and they make us a lot more estrogenic. And I think this is something important for us to understand in modern living, which is why when you're working with someone like myself or Jenny, we're like, how do we reduce this toxic load? What chemicals are you putting on your skin? What chemicals are you cleaning with? What plastics are you using? So that's what we're talking about there.
And even the laundry detergent that you use. And one of the biggest ones is
Yeah.
fragrance. So it's not just perfume, it's Lenore in your washing. It's highly fragranced washing laundry powder or liquid. It's even dishwasher tablets are chemicals that
Full of it.
end up on your dishes and this sort of thing. So
And they don't have to list the chemicals in it, right? It sounds something like eau de parfum or something, or fragrance, which sounds really
yeah,
like French boutique. It's just a load of chemicals that we have been conditioned think smell clean, but actually they're just toxins that are really disrupting us. With perfumes, spraying it on your lymph nodes, the insanity of it. You're putting that, like Jenny's saying, the washing detergent, that's on your skin all day, being absorbed into every cell of your body. Sorry, Jenny.
e-cover. There's a little question there. E-cover. I recently thought I'm gonna swap, and I decided e-cover because it used to be a great product. Unfortunately, it's been bought out by a conglomerate. I think it might be Unilever, and I had to throw it away because it was so highly perfumed that I couldn't stand the smell of the clothes. I had to rewash them. So e-cover, I would say no. I like Care because that's unfragranced. Or you can buy the little eggs that have just got charcoal in them, charcoal balls in them that you put the sort of eggy thing into the washing machine and it washes your clothes without any chemicals. But one of the main things are.
This is also a good brand just off of Amazon called Attitude.
Oh
It's a
yeah,
really clean product that they've got as
I've
well.
not
And
heard
they
of.
do spray. Yeah, they've got do like a side spray and a washing detergent. They're really nice product.
Oh yeah, plugins, Febreze, and fragranced candles, and even some essential oils are estrogenic. So lavender is highly estrogenic. What do we do as mothers? I remember giving my babies a daily massage with lavender. Highly estrogenic. Lovely, makes them sleep, whatever. But it's those sorts of things that you do need to think about um, as if you can smell it, it has a xenoestrogen type of reaction. It will create some sort of xenoestrogen reaction in the body.
So hopefully that started to create some like, okay, where can I start to clear some of these things? I mean, I don't know about you, Jenny, but if I walk in a house and there's a plug in, I just walk along flicking the switches off. My mother-in-law hates me because I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing should we talk about is maybe a genetic predisposition around methylation and metabolizing the hormones and explaining a little bit about what that looks like.
Can I just go back to the fragrances as
Yes,
well?
of course, yeah.
And what causes what contributes to estrogen dominance? One of the things that, it's not quite sure, we're not quite sure whether it's which came first, the chicken or the egg, but if you're estrogen dominant, there's a highly likely chance that you have issues with hypothyroidism. Hypothyroidism occurs when you become severely estrogen dominant. And you'll go off to your doctor and you'll say, I'm having trouble, and this, virtually every single health condition can be linked back to how well your metabolism functions, whether that's cancer or whether it's not being able to get out of bed in the morning, whether it's having itchy skin or whatever. Women that take estrogen often have quite low body temperatures, and a low body temperature and a low pulse rate can be indicative of hypothyroidism. So it's all, when you sort of think about it, the endocrine system is completely linked in its entirety, and so one will come to the other. And you can go off to the doctor and ask to be tested, and they test a marker that isn't even a thyroid marker, it's just a pituitary marker called the TSH, and then they pronounce you normal. However, that is something that's well worth looking into as part of estrogen dominance as well. So I just wanted to get that in there. What was the question?
Yeah, so then I was just, did that feel
methylation?
Did that feel complete on you around the thyroid? That usually if we're seeing women who are estrogen dominant, we want to look at the thyroid as well.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
But the problem is that when you go to a normal doctor, your GP, or even an endocrinologist, they are taught to just assess thyroid through the TSH, and that is inadequate. It's inadequate. It doesn't, like, you can be told that you don't have hypothyroid issues, and that your thyroid is perfect, and actually clinically you can be like this for many, many years, and you can be chasing all of the symptoms. Even anxiety and depression are often a hypothyroid issue. So I think part of women's health, that is something that really needs a lot of thought and a lot of individual investigation on your part. If you think you have a thyroid issue, you need to learn as much as you can about that yourself, because you won't get many doctors within the NHS that actually assess that well and treat you well.
And I think that's really important, because also, as we're talking about estrogen dominance as a deficiency of progesterone, the thyroid needs progesterone. If you're looking at low thyroid, you're going to be looking at a struggling. If you're looking at low progesterone, you're going to be looking at a struggling thyroid as well, because 100%. We're talking about systems here, not this medical approach. That's over there, that's over there. It's a system. Hormone imbalances don't occur in a vacuum. If one is down, the system is going to be being affected. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's move on to methylation.
Interestingly though, women, so the NHS tests TSH, and they also sometimes they'll test your T4. T4 is an inactive thyroid marker. It just tells you, and what women need is, they need that T4 to being converted at our liver via methylation to the active hormone, which is T3. T3 drops with age because of the progesterone link. So when progesterone starts to decline, we get issues with T3, because T3 depends on progesterone for they both are mutually synthesis together. They synthesize together. So one of the things that estrogen dominance does is it blocks the conversion. When estrogen is dominant, estrogen is sent to the liver to be tagged, sent to bile, and then disposed of through the gut and out through the bowel. And when it's unbalanced, it gets clogged at the liver, and then that produces basically an imbalance in the liver that prevents the liver from also converting your thyroid hormones. So you can sort of see how. And then women start HRT and they're like, oh, I'm really cold, or like and they start reeling off the hypothyroid symptoms. And when you go off to, if you were to go and look at the menopause symptoms alongside hypothyroid symptoms, you would find that there's a hell of a lot. There's a lot of crossover. And women sometimes think, I think I am hypothyroid. And then they go off to the doctor and they're told, no, you're not hypothyroid at all. And so then they go down the HRT route thinking that that's just menopause, and they don't feel better taking menopause treatment, like taking HRT. And one of the reasons for that is because they didn't really need HRT. They probably needed to be properly diagnosed with thyroid issues before they even started the HRT. Anyway, I'm on my soapbox. I'm big on thyroid as well. So
I love it. You're like, again, one of your very, very informed discussions. So should we move on to liver?
Yeah.
And what the liver's doing with estrogens and why it matters. And also, just in context of this, I could see one of the comments is like, I am so exhausted of having to know this information myself. And I want to really witness that. And before we go into the genetics conversation, this is not about becoming a geneticist. This is not about the whole conversation about hormones. You do not need to become a biochemist with these things. But the reason that women are having to go to this extent, even being a webinar like this, is because by its own admission, we're operating within a misogynistic medical system that does not know our bodies. We have been actively excluded from research because of our hormones. So we've been treated like small men. Hormones have just really not been something anyone's bothered looking into, yet we know they rule everything, right? So I want to really witness that, because women are exhausted and down the rabbit holes and quite often come to me, and I'm sure you, Jenny, with all this information, completely overwhelmed, in paralysis, like, what do I do with it all? So just before that's great timing, just to witness, we're about to talk about genetics, but please don't think you have to go off and start researching genes and go. There's so many other things you can do that are much simpler and more basic to regulate hormones, like going to sleep at a decent time, having some protein for breakfast, getting some daylight. Don't underestimate these things. Yes, the genetics are going to have an impact, like we will speak about, but please don't make that your starting point. So that's just my little rant about that.
I mean, there's a famous saying: genetics load the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. If you are the sort of person that, with ADHD women, they have a higher propensity to genetic SNPs that on the MTHFR gene and COMT as well, COMT. This means that, I'm not a great I'm not a great sort of like scholar on genetics. There's loads of people can sort of like rattle off homozygous and all these sorts of things, and I find it reasonably confusing. I just can't get my head around it. However, MTHFR typically means that you detox estrogen slower. Estrogen doesn't move through your system as fast as it would if you had normal genetic makeup. The COMT is also responsible for some issues with detoxing adrenaline. And if you sort of like think about Dr. Michael Platt's book and ADHD and the way that he uses progesterone, his book is called Adrenaline Dominance, and it's a brilliant book. It's well worth a read.
I'm just actually on that. I'm working with the CEO of Platt Wellness and Carol Peterson to create a guidance document particularly around ADHD and progesterone. So that's going to be making its way through at some point as well.
Oh, brilliant. That sounds great.
Yeah, hopefully.
So the thing is, the liver is the main organ in the body that filters toxins, and there's certain things that you can do to support your liver regardless of your genetic status. So things like eating the right amount of protein, eating carbohydrates, healthy carbohydrates. So that's fruit juice, potatoes, rice, dairy products, if you can cope with them, tuber or squash type vegetables, root vegetables, maple syrup, and honey. Those are good quality carbs. So we don't mean in oodles of pasta, biscuits, donuts, all of those. Well, donuts and biscuits have quite high fat content, and that fat content isn't the right types of fat. It's also clogging to the liver. I mean, it's a completely different rabbit hole, but just the liver doesn't cope with high amounts of polyunsaturated fats. So you want to try to support your liver with monounsaturated fats within a finely tuned macro balance, or saturated fat, and try to, because when PUFA acts at the liver, polyunsaturated fatty acids, when PUFA acts at the liver, that clogs the liver and it's estrogenic. So that sort of thing. So it's all about this sort of like diet support and supporting your liver. I mean, yes, you can take NAC, you can take what's another one, milk thistle, or so these sort of other compounds. Tudka is a really good liver cleanser and things like that. But basically just making sure you get your B vitamins, your protein, like making sure you eat the right amount of carbs. All of those things are going to help your liver with processing out the toxins that you have ingested. Does that make any sense? I'm sorry, I've gone on a bit of a tangent.
I think it's important to have that conversation in the, yes, there might be these genetic predispositions to it, and it can be useful to explore that. And once we know, we can start working on things to address them through lifestyle. But like we're saying, those things kind of take a bit of capacity, I think. Once you're in clinic, they kind of take some thought, they take a bit of bandwidth. Even in terms of remembering to take supplements in itself can be a challenge for some women, which is where when women come to me, they're like, right, I think I've got this MTHFR SNP and I think this is what's going on. It's like, let's just calm all the noise and get these strong foundational basic pillars in place first. And when we've increased your bandwidth and capacity, then let's start that exploration. But we don't want to go in my opinion, go, right, it's an MTHFR SNP, what are we going to do about it? We just want to take a moment to get everything else settled, because if your nervous system is in fight or flight, being fueled by progesterone deficiency and estrogen dominance, your body is going to override everything. That's what it's designed to do. If you're in a stress state, your body's going to focus on saving you from the bear. Okay, we know the GABA receptors in the brain, which are basically the end product of the progesterone calming Valium effect. When you're in a stress state, those receptors literally suck into the cells. So they're not going to be available to give you that calming effect. And till we start just calming everything the fuck down, quite frankly, that's where we start to bring optimization. And we can do that through things like regulating your blood sugar. I think this is one of the most underrated ways to get maximum output for so many things. Because when you're regulating your blood sugar, you're improving your natural progesterone production indirectly.
And the liver is the liver is the place that regulates blood sugar.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there anything else you want to particularly cover? Because I think we've covered everything that came through as the questions. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Jenny?
I'd like to talk about prolactin.
Yeah.
So I get a lot of women that come through and they say, well, I've had my estrogen and my estrogen's been tested and it's low. And my first question is always, did you also have your prolactin tested? Estrogen blood testing is not the full picture. If you have a progesterone deficiency, so Kate Deering explains it, that estrogen in blood is just estrogen on the highway going somewhere. So if you've got low blood estrogen, that doesn't necessarily mean that you've got low estrogen and that you need to take estrogen. It might mean that you've got estrogen sitting in cells, and typically it sits in adipose tissue. And estrogen it's capable. Dr. Ray Peat points out that every cell in the human body is capable of producing estrogen, and when you're under stress, it produces more estrogen. So cells aren't in the bloodstream. Blood vessels are in the bloodstream, and we don't have apart from a biopsy, we don't have the current system doesn't have a way of testing estrogen in tissues or cells. So, but prolactin and estrogen have a symbiotic relationship. So if you have low estrogen, sometimes if you test prolactin and that prolactin is elevated beyond the bottom of the reference range, then that might indicate that you have stored tissue estrogen, because prolactin works in lockstep with estrogen. I know that's so confusing. Sorry, I'm not really explaining it properly. But I always ask people to test prolactin. Prolactin, unless you're breastfeeding, high prolactin levels, I think there's clinical studies that show that women with high prolactin are more likely to get osteoporosis, for instance. It's an inflammatory marker, and it can and it often is a marker which clinicians look at, not very often, and when they do, I mean, I've got somebody in group at the moment because I posted something on prolactin the other day, that theirs is at the very top of the marker and slightly over it, and her clinician is still saying, oh, it's fine. So, but she's having all these estrogenic symptoms. So I think if you have a low estrogen reading on anything, I would go and get yourself a prolactin blood test.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you'd like to share, Jenny? You've got quite a few questions in the comments that we can go to.
I can't see those. Where are they?
Oh, okay. Do you feel happy to go to questions?
So I've written down. Oh, why didn't I do that? So estrogen increases mitotic and secretory activity in several cells in the pituitary, but specifically the proliferation of prolactin cells. So yeah.
Translate that.
Basically, I'm just trying to think about how it's basically what I've said before, but estrogen increases prolactin, and prolactin is estrogen increases prolactin. Now prolactin can be called, high prolactin can be caused by vitamin B deficiency as well, and magnesium and B deficiency also linked to low progesterone, and progesterone is a compound that lowers prolactin. So it's all connected.
Thank you. So I'm going to start going through the questions. So I'd love to know more about continuous versus cyclical progesterone. I have a history of PMDD, currently in full remission from herbal medicine and clinical metabolic psychiatric ketogenic diet, and autistic ADHD. I cannot take stimulants. Wow, my GP does test progesterone and estrogen and talks about estrogen dominant phases of perimenopause. I mean, hold on to that, GP, for dear life, is what I would say there. and allow for progesterone only treatment. I mean, this is basically unheard of. So I love that. And saying there's a high amount of neurospicy, PMDD, and trans community down in Brighton, which is wonderful. Now, this is something that I feel quite passionately about, and I'm sure Jenny is going to have lots to pipe in on this around the cyclical versus continuous dosing. I think it's a real needs-led basis. What I would say from the beginning, I absolutely don't agree with this on-off cyclical dosing in the NHS. In most cases in perimenopause that I see, I don't think it serves women. The reason for that is this is what doctors and prescribers are trained in. I hate this image. It's really outdated and it causes problems. This gives the illusion that progesterone isn't doing anything in that first half of the cycle, right? But it's factually incorrect. This is accurate of what is happening. And the body is always producing higher levels of progesterone than estrogen. It's just if we ovulate, we produce tons of it. It's off the chart. Right. So this for me provides quite a strong model of continual dosing in some forms. Now, this is going to be very dependent on where you are in your cycle and your life phases, because if you start putting 200 mg of progesterone or more here, it will shut down ovulation. Okay. So if you are a woman who's in your 20s or even early 30s and you're wanting to be ovulating for fertility reasons, perhaps, you want to be really cautious about how much is being used here. But what we might do with someone in that situation who's experiencing PMDD and finding progesterone is like, oh my gosh, I'm now taking progesterone in a higher dose here and feeling great. But when I don't take it at all here, I'm actually feeling worse in this phase now. So we might look at saying, okay, perhaps 100 mg during these first 2 weeks, but you take 300 to 400 here. You know, it's going to be different for every woman. But when I'm talking about being cyclical, that's the kind of thing I would be looking at rather than on off. I don't generally see that happening.
Yeah,
What
I would
about
agree with
Jenny?
that. That's what I would do. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's when we're talking about cycling and continual dosing. Some women do brilliantly just being on a continuous dose of progesterone with no break. Some women, and the research shows that occasionally there's some evidence that the receptors become flooded, and there's a theory that you may benefit from 2 to 7 days off to let the receptors resensitize. So it's unique to you,
Yeah.
and seeing what happens is what I would say. But I'm not a fan of this on off.
Yeah, I think I see some women that do take a break and they go from, like some of them have the good luck to have been prescribed 800 in their luteal phase only. And when you go from 800 to nothing, that's quite the withdrawal. So, yeah, I think it depends on you as a person, if you can take a break, and some people do, like it's not going to just disappear overnight when you stop. It's going to sort of like take a while to residually decline. Then some people do really well on just cyclical. But if you find that you're feeling not so great, like you've got increased insomnia, or your anxiety starts to kick up, or your PMDD symptoms, you get more irritable with your spouse, or you want to kill them with a kitchen knife or whatever. Yeah, then you may need to think about whether or not you do need to have a little bit in the follicular phase. The other thing that I would say is PMDD doesn't come just on its own. You've often got other symptoms like heavy bleeding.
Mm.
And I was a heavy bleeder. I've always been a heavy bleeder. And I didn't know this until Carol Peterson pointed it out to me, that heavy bleeders have less progesterone in their follicular phase, and that allows estrogen to lay down a thicker uterine lining. And she suggested to me that I needed to use my progesterone in my follicular phase as well, to try to dampen down the effects of estrogen laying down such a thick lining. Now, I was in my late 40s by that point, and I was having numerous issues with PMDD and perimenopause. And one of my worst issues was constant bleeding, clots, and those sorts of things. But I wish I'd found out about that much, much earlier, and I wish I could have tried to fix what was actually happening in my 30s, as opposed to, you know, when I got to the point of no return.
Thank you, Jenny, for sharing that. Okay, Lucy, I'm curious about how hydration plays into hormone effectiveness. Is there science behind hydration being important for the hormone molecules to behave their best, travel, and be absorbed properly in the body? I've not seen research on that, but what I know about the body, I would say yes, absolutely. You know, if the body's dehydrated, the system, the lymphatic system, the circulatory system that moves the hormones around the body is simply not going to be as effective, and the cells aren't going to be as juicy to be able to absorb and move them through as they need. Have you seen anything, Jenny?
I haven't actually seen anything specifically about hydration, but I know sodium is very important when you're hydrating. I don't ever drink water on its own. I always drink water with electrolytes, which I use. I don't really drink loads of water. I drink orange juice and coconut water mixed together with salt. And if I do have water, I have a pinch of Maldon sea salt in it. So you've always got that sort of like the mineral replacement. If you drink large volumes of plain water, non-filtered as well, which is not great, due to the chemicals in it, I think it basically, it just flushes your kidneys through, and it's not helpful really to anybody. I mean, I used to be a person that drank 2 liters of water, sometimes more, every day, and thought it was the best thing, but I was always on the toilet and I was not very healthy. So I think if you're going to drink large volumes of water, you need to make sure you're replacing the salts that are being lost.
Lovely. And the next question, Jenny, which I'm going to leave totally to you after your latest Facebook post, is there an estrogen and breast cancer link? My friend has been on blocker meds because of her cancer history. It's very relevant right now with the recent removal from estrogen HRT warnings. The warning around cancer has been removed. So I'm going to leave the stage to you, Jenny, for this.
Oh, all right, where do you start? It's okay. So if you think about this logically with a critical mind, estrogen is classified as a growth hormone. It grows babies. It repairs your skin if you cut it. It keeps your vaginal tissue healthy because it's, you know, plumps the skin up there. However, when it's overdosed and not opposed by real progesterone, it still acts as it still does its biological job, which is to grow things. I don't believe that any estrogen should be declassified as causing cancer, because in the wrong situations, even in women that don't take HRT, when they're estrogen dominant, and there's a reason why it's called estrogen receptor positive cancer, it grows stuff, it grows things. And if you mix that with a progestogen that isn't real progesterone, you've got even more chance of, or even more chances of creating the conditions that could cause issues like cancer, you know. But unbalanced and unopposed estrogen doesn't just grow cancer. It can grow uterine tissue, adenomyosis, fibroids, endometriosis, polyps. It's responsible for fibrocystic breast disease. And, you know, what does that turn into? Sometimes, in many cases, that if it's not sort of like controlled, or then that can turn into breast cancer. So, I mean, estrogen is linked to it, even to things like prostate cancer. You know, like men that get prostate cancer are told that it's the testosterone that's causing the issue. But if you think about it, why aren't all the really healthy, high testosterone men in their 20s getting prostate cancer? It doesn't make any sense. And any of it, all of it, the narrative around it is created to be able to create new drugs that earn money. And, yes, estrogen blocking drugs like tamoxifen, for instance. Tamoxifen is a mildly estrogenic substance, and it works by blocking estrogen receptors at the breast, and yet it increases the risk for uterine cancer. So I don't know what the percentage is, but women are told, or should be told, that if they're taking this medicine and they're still menstruating, they need to be very careful and tell their consultants if they start bleeding, having any changes to their bleed or anything like that. So, yeah, I don't know if that's answered the question.
Thanks, Jenny. I'm conscious we're coming up to the end of the hour. So if any of you need to leave, please do. I want us to work through these questions, which I'll capture on the recording. But I just wanted to keep that safety of the timing and recognise that for everybody. So if you do need to go, thank you very much for joining us live. And I will get this out as soon as possible. I'm just waiting for my PA to pop me the email addresses. So as soon as that is, I will get this out. But thank you to those of us who joined us live. And we'll continue going through the questions for those of you who'd like to stay. So I'm pretty sure, due to my history with my cycle, that I suffer with estrogen dominance. I've been on bioidentical HRT for nearly a year, but when I take progesterone, I get terrible sinus problems and migraines, which I have read is likely linked to the progesterone. These only last whilst I'm taking the progesterone. Is this still likely to be sensitization to estrogen?
Yes.
Yes. Short answer, yes.
Short answer, yes. What you could try to do is to have your estrogen dose when you start the progesterone. See if that makes a difference. Carol Peterson often recommends that women that have issues with progesterone, when they start taking it, to halve the dose of the estrogen. When you actually really think about it, when you look at your slides that you've been showing, estrogen peaks at ovulation, and then it has a mini peak and mini rise mid luteal phase. Those are the only two times that it was the other one, I think.
1 and 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are the only times when estrogen is ovulation is typically a time when estrogen peaks, and it's literally hours, and then it's opposed again. And the reason that is done is, or the reason that the body does that, is because it knows that estrogen is a growth hormone. Why do we need to be dosing women with a consistent dose throughout the month, especially in the luteal phase, when in a normal woman's cycle, progesterone should be the dominant hormone, and we aren't recognizing that? We're just blanket filling women with estrogen, and estrogen kickback will happen when you add progesterone to it. So yeah, there you go. That's the answer.
Thank you. And in terms of HRT, when you take a higher amount of progesterone, do you also need to have to increase estrogen? No, you absolutely don't. Always lead with progesterone. When you get the progesterone right, then see what you're left with. But progesterone should always be in the lead.
Just as for those of you that are on HRT, I'm 56 now. I've never taken estrogen. I take 400 milligrams of progesterone every day. And I was estrogen dominant, severely estrogen dominant. I had retrospectively diagnosed with fibroids. I had endometriosis when I was much younger, PMDD. I've always had very heavy, cloggy periods. I never bled bright red blood. It was always dark brown. And I have no menopause symptoms. Sometimes I'll get a little bit of insomnia when there's a full moon, but that's it. I have no menopause symptoms. So I'm not saying you don't need estrogen, but estrogen needs to be something that is a last resort. I thought to myself, I'm going to start with this and see how I get on. if I need it at the, I'm never say never. If I need it, but I don't, I'm 56. I've probably been in full menopause now for 2 years, and I haven't needed it. So there's a lot that progesterone can do for you. And progesterone, I would say, is the true female hormone. Men produce estrogen. Um, Estrogen is a growth hormone, that it shouldn't be labeled as the female hormone, and we shouldn't be being pushed into taking really large doses of it. With
Women worry about not getting estrogen is their bones. Progesterone grows bones. Okay, we need to move away from this narrative that it's all about estrogen. It's not.
Yeah, and there's no
Okay.
there's no actual evidence, as much as they've tried to manufacture it, that estrogen prevents dementia or anything else. Yes, estrogen is involved in bone health, but I personally think that I'm probably producing enough of my own estrogen. I've got areas of fat deposits where I would love them not to be, but there's estrogen in there. So I think that, this constant sort of like push and fear mongering into the fact that if you don't take it, you're gonna end up in a nursing home with broken bones and with with dementia, and not knowing people's names, is fear-based marketing. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Vera, this is all fascinating. I'd love to learn more from this. Do you have any resources, and where would you recommend to go to get a better understanding? So I've got resources on my website. There's lots of free webinars with Dr. Phyllis Bronson, Carol Peterson. There's my progesterone book is on there. Lots of resources that you can get. And Jenny's Facebook group is packed full of resources as well. Okay, we've covered the eco-vet. Can my 18-year-old daughter, who has been given Slinder, so Slinder is a synthetic progestin pill, take natural progesterone? She is still rather anxious. No is the short answer. When you have the pill, the synthetic progestin locks onto your progesterone receptors. So Carol Peterson's word would be you're spitting in the wind, trying to replace that with progesterone. It just can't get onto the receptor. So it's just going to float about and not be able to actually do anything. And
I would
still,
say that if she wants to stop the pill, yes,
yeah,
you can take
yes,
progesterone.
absolutely. And I'm not surprised she's still anxious, because that's usually a side effect of the being on the pill.
Yeah,
It's
because
really messy for our girls.
yeah, we need to sort of break down what the progestin only pill does. And the
Yeah.
progestin only pill prevents you from ovulating, and therefore it it depletes your natural progesterone levels, because none of the progesterone, even if you were to be able to produce it, can access the receptor, because that drug is locked into the receptor. Then because you've then started to deplete your progesterone levels, your estrogen levels naturally become unbalanced on the pill. And it doesn't matter whether it's an estrogen combined pill or whether it's a progestin pill, it still happens. And it's an under the radar type thing that starts off slow. But then I spent 2 decades on progestin medications thinking I was taking progesterone. And I literally was so flabbergasted and horrified and mad that I'd been told that I was taking this apparent hormone, and I was really just taking a chemical that basically started causing all my problems, my endometriosis, the fact that I was so, like, the pill's been studied and found to be how you like you it changes how you even look for a mate. And
Yeah.
there's so many really bad things about the pill, and that's the only thing your doctor will offer you. At 18, they will say, oh no, she can't have real progesterone. So unfortunately, you have to look outside the box. You have to go um, and source it yourself. But yes, if it was me at my 18-year-old self again, and I knew this stuff, I would go for natural progesterone. As far as like for anxiety, you just have to dose it, keep dosing it until the anxiety disappears.
Yeah. Sorry, there's no magic answer there. Contraceptives is the bane of women's lives, I think. Okay, so is there a list of things to create of xenoestrogens to avoid? I would use an app like Dirty, because you can go in and scan it and see how clean a product. The list of xenoestrogens is gazillions long. You just need to look. Go. The app has done the work for yourself. You can test the products that way, as they're on like a RAG system. I have gallstones and manage them through diet, but would HRT make this harder? This is a really interesting one. Um, because I'd love to hear your views as well, because I think estrogen dominance and gallstones have an absolute relationship.
Yeah, they do.
We want to be really mindful around estrogen HRT being brought in there. One of the things I can see with progesterone is it can be a relaxant. It's a muscle relaxant, so you might notice things moving about a little bit when it comes to the gallbladder and the pressure there. Just something to be mindful of. Is there anything you want to add on that, Jenny?
If you've got gallstones, estrogen is very much implicated in the development of them. I mean, gallstones is something that is a side effect from taking the birth control pill, and many women find they need their gallbladders removed because of birth control. I think promoting liver health and bile flow is something that, because the gallstones build up because the bile's not flowing quick enough. So you can take there's certain supplements and things that you can get. Kitty Martone from the Estrogen Dominance Support Group has a really great detox course, and it's, if you do a short, there's two courses. One's a wee bit more expensive than the other, but the 2-week one is $25, and it will give you a really good way, a really good insight as to what you can do, like things like castor oil packs over the liver, and to help with all. I mean, it's just, the Americans have got a lot more information about these sorts of things than we do here, especially within our NHS. I mean, it's changing slightly now, but it really I think improving liver health, and then if you drink alcohol, stop, and sort of, there's obviously certain sort of like supplements that can help with improving bile flow as well. Tudka and taurine is a good one as well, because both are very supportive of liver. And Tudka is TUDCA. You have to start quite slowly with it because it can be quite potent, but it's a combination of taurine and ox bile, and it's apparently really amazing. So those sorts of things would be something that I would think about.
Thank you. I'm learning so much. Thank you. This should be accessible to all perimenopausal women. Thank you. Lindsay, I feel way more empowered and knowledgeable since working with you, Adele. Thank you. So, in case of slow detox, your body stores estrogen. My doctor says it would be visible in the blood works, and I have a low estrogen level. She keeps increasing my estrogen dose of HRT. I'm hoping that the way Jenny's answered that about it being stored in the tissues and not being picked up in the blood has helped to answer that. And I would say I cannot stand this approach to HRT. Oh, there's a problem. Let's up your estrogen. Let's up your estrogen. I'm hoping from today you've realized why we would absolutely not support that approach. What else is going on that doesn't need more estrogen being pumped into the body? Estrogen for me is the last thing that I even want to be considering with a woman. There is so much more that needs looking at, but unfortunately this is a very common approach to managing HRT.
Yeah, I mean, the Louise Newsom approach of testing, saying that you mustn't be absorbing because it's not in your bloodstream, and then giving off license amounts and ignoring women's feedback about what that's causing is a terrible approach. And it's unfortunately percolated into most of private practice. And because she's been offering this freaking free HRT course for doctors, you often get the same sort of thing filtering into your NHS as well. So if it was me, I would go out and pay for a private prolactin test and see where you are. Prolactin needs to be towards the bottom end of your marker. And I'd also look at, I mean, we've not really mentioned how to detox estrogen well. I like
Whole day retreat, Jenny. That's what I've decided.
and
We've got so many questions here, and I'm going to draw this to a close in about 10 minutes, and we'll get through what we can get through here because there's just so much of it.
Let
This
me
is
just
perfect.
mention, so something that can really help with your detoxing of estrogen is a simple, raw, grated carrot salad each day. So endotoxin is something that builds up in the gut when you get a lot of, like endotoxin is also called lipopolysaccharide, and it's inflammatory. It can get through the lining of the gut into the bloodstream. It's not great stuff.
Horrible.
Basically, if researchers want to cause inflammation and cause disease, they inject animal subjects with this thing called lipopolysaccharide. And the raw carrot salad and also boiled mushrooms and cooked bamboo shoots are all very good because that insoluble fiber, they go through the gut and with the fiber, and the fiber sweeps out endotoxin and alongside discharged estrogen in the bowel. It improves motility, and basically it just sweeps it all out. And it's a really, really good way, cheap, accessible. You do it with a 1-to-1 dressing of olive oil and apple cider vinegar. You can I add lashings of salt to it and some honey, and it's brilliant. And you eat it away from food as a snack once a day, and you should be good to go.
Brilliant. I love that recipe. So there was a question about prolactin. I think you covered that in terms of the dosing, but let me know if that wasn't the case, Vera. You mentioned that some people are on 2000 mg of progesterone daily. What is the breakdown on how it's taken and when? E.g., how much orally at night, how much via cream? How do you work out the optimal dose, combination of sources, and where do you start? This is the dance with progesterone. Okay, we know what it can do. Your challenge is going to be finding all of that for yourself. So Jenny shared an example. My example of my doses is I take 1200 to 1800 in a 24-hour period. Okay, that manages all of my symptoms. I've got adenomyosis, endometriosis, massive genetic predisposition to insomnia, ADHD. Everything is genetically hardwired against me to feel well. And that's the dose that works for me. And what that looks like is 400 mg orally for sleep, 400 mg vaginally broken into 2 doses, one in the evening, one in the morning, to protect my uterus with the adeno. And then I use the cream on a needs-led basis, depending where I'm at. That takes time to get there. So there isn't a magic formula to answer. It's working with a prescriber who understands this to get you to that dose. So sorry not to have a magic formula, but that's the way that it's used. Okay, I'm curious about how hydration we've spoken about that, haven't we? We did that one. Okay, are we still cycling even if we're not bleeding anymore? If you've stopped bleeding, it's unlikely you're ovulating. So there wouldn't be a cycle as such.
Some practitioners, I mean, Dr. Ray Peat, PhD, he used to say take a week's break so that the receptors don't get saturated. If you don't feel well taking that break, then just carry on. I personally, I don't take a break. I tried to take a break once. I tried to, and eventually I was annoyed at my husband leaving the toilet seat up. It was just ridiculous.
I don't sleep, and I literally feel insane, so I don't take a break. And this is interesting, Alex, and a common question, and I'm conscious we're going to wrap up in a few minutes. What about the side effects? I feel so tired on progesterone, even 100 mg vaginally, or even worse. My instant response to that is a very low dose of progesterone. What do you see with that, Jenny?
See, that's a hard one because some people do naturally just convert it to pregnenolone, and that's the sedative. Whether or not that would, I mean, some people say that they feel really tired and then that wears off after a while. Some people still, after 3 months, they're still feeling tired. So it's individual, I think, on how it's metabolized to a certain degree. But 100 milligrams is a low dose. Are you taking estrogen with it? Is it on its own? Are you eating enough during the day to sort of,
Relating properly.
yeah,
Yeah.
to yeah, yes, with estrogen, yeah. So
Probably needs a bit of a deep dive, I think, is our
yeah,
honest answer of looking at what's
yeah,
going on
that
for
isn't
you.
something I could give a
Yeah.
complete.
There's so many elements to it. Vera, perhaps I missed this, but could you explain progesterone sensitivity? So that was when we were at the start of the webinar talking about Dr. Phyllis's review on this and estrogen kickback. That tends to be what we see is it's too low a dose, sensitizing the estrogen receptors, and it's estrogen kickback rather than true progesterone sensitivity. But if you can't find that, have any more questions, Vera, just come back to us. Peter, I'm not going to be able to go through that, I'm afraid, but you're very welcome to reach out to us. Can you recommend any prescribers, and would you and Jenny do that and take clients? Yeah, we both take clients. The prescriber I run my clinic with is Dr. Adele through Derma Medica. He's the polar opposite of me. He's very quiet and inward and reflective, but he's wonderful when it comes to progesterone. What about you, Jenny?
I don't prescribe, but there are ways and means of getting it to be able to. What I like to do is to educate women to advocate for themselves and make their own decisions. I think that, you know, taking your health into your own hands and not specifically getting somebody to do it all for you is, you know, you've got to learn. You've got to learn. This is your body, and you really do need to learn about what this does to you. And everybody is individual. Progesterone itself is an incredibly safe hormone, and there are ways and means. I mean, it's available over the counter in places like Spain and Portugal and Malta and Turkey. It's just restricted here because we've got this outdated view that it causes cancer. And so, you know, like there are ways in me. I mean, I recommend owners to anyone that needs it. So I don't have a prescriber that I work with. If you really want to, certainly in my group, if you really want to work with somebody that does do prescribing, I often say to go to Adele in the clinic.
Perfect point to stop, I think, Jenny. Jenny, just been asked, what's the name of your Facebook group so everyone can join?
Oh God, it's called. Is there going to be notes?
Yes, we can send it out. If you can send me the link, I'll put it
Yes.
out with the email with the
It's
recording.
called PMDD/PMS/healthy hormone options, I think. I'm thinking about changing
Jenny,
the name.
lovely title.
I know. I'm thinking about changing the name, but I still can't come up with one that is half
Yeah.
decent, that sort of
Well,
encompasses
thank
everything.
you. Thank you, Jenny, for being here with all of your knowledge. Thank you, everyone, for turning up live. I'm sorry if we haven't got to all of the questions, but we are here and really hope there's something really outstanding for you. Do pop us an email with that. And really hope that the information was useful. The recording will be coming out as soon as possible. So
Thank you,
thank you
everybody, for
all.
attending. We really appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.